3 days. 3 days, 6, 7.
All right, guys, let's kick things off. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Tuesday, February 23rd, 2016. Welcome to the filter number 78. We've done this 77 times before, and we're still going. We still got something interesting to talk about. Hopefully that'll still be the case tonight. Tonight's show is called The War on Encryption. It's all over the news lately. Maybe you guys have seen this open letter from Tim Cook. It's actually a lot larger discussion going on around the world. We'll get to that. But before that, we've got, of course, local news. Since we are trying to build a Bitcoin economy here in Ubud, we've always got interesting things happening locally. We're going to cover that. As always, the price. It's been a wild ride this week. Did you guys watch the price go up and down? Any theories on why the price went up and down this week?
There's a sort of or at least on paper agreement that there will be.
Yes, the Bitcoin Roundtable.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you're right about that. We're going to talk about the Bitcoin Roundtable. We've also got a new release of Bitcoin, version 12. Is this the version where Bitcoin breaks? We're going to take a look at release number 12 and this replace by fee that is now out in the wild. Do you guys remember replace by fee? It sounds nerdy, but I promise you it'll be interesting, hopefully. Okay, and then we'll get to the war on encryption. So let's go ahead and kick things off. I'm going to share my screen with the folks at home here. So they're seeing what we see up on the big screen there. All right, today's show, the war on encryption. We are coming to you live from Hubud, the hub in Ubud. They are nice enough to provide us with an air-conditioned space every week, and we really appreciate it. Of course, if you're ever in Bali and you find yourself here on a Tuesday, we hope you'll join us in person. But if you're not, of course, we broadcast this online on our YouTube channel. You can see these are all the past episodes. You can watch it live, or you can go to the YouTube channel and watch it after the fact. We also have a conversation going on here inside the Facebook group, Bitcoins in Bali. The way it works is we gather here while we're not together in person, and you can post stories here for us to talk about. There's the story that JP posted earlier this week that caused all the stir and inspired today's episode. Did you know you inspired today's show, JP? No wonder you're here. I had to do something to get you to come back. But anyway, that's the way it works. Hopefully we can crowdsource all of the cool, interesting stories about Bitcoin, and then when we get together on Tuesday night, we talk about it. We also have a conversation going on hashtag Bitcoins in Bali on Twitter. I've got a little tweet here all teed up. We'll go ahead and release that into the world. Hopefully somebody will join us online based on that. And okay, local news. March 5th, we're going to have our Bitcoin 101. Tell your friends, find your noobs, send us your inexperienced people. We start from scratch. We assume people know nothing about Bitcoin. And by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, people have Bitcoin on their phone, and they're able to turn their Bitcoin into hamburgers and French fries. It's like a big 3-hour magic trick from start to finish. But it is a lot of fun. Even if you've been to Bitcoin 101 before, please join us. It's a very good time. That happens March 5th. Space is limited. Let us know you're coming. There's a little registration link here, which will send me an email so that I can prepare for you to arrive March 5th. How many people went to the Bitcoin Film Festival we had back in January? Yeah, that was fun. We packed the house over at Paradiso. Well, the Bitcoin Film Festival is put on by some guys out of Berlin. They're going to have the last screening tomorrow in Buenos Aires, and then after that, we'll have the winners. So next week, we should know the winners from the Bitcoin Film Festival. I think you might still have a chance to vote if you're so inclined. But the festival ends tomorrow. What's that?
Okay, then we can watch the films.
Yes.
Again.
Yeah. All right. How many people saw this little story from Airbits? They've basically did a little story about all of the places in Bali where Bitcoin is accepted. The Cinnamon Coffee's in there, and the Viceroy Hotel, and the Onion Collective. There's Hubud, there's Vito. I don't think he's seen this yet.
Well, he's an artist.
Yes, he's an artist.
So
Sissy. But anyway, that was pretty cool that the folks from Airboots put that together. And of course, they've got their whole directory put together, which is available within the app. So if you've got an Airboots wallet, you can find the places around town that are accepting Bitcoin. So yeah, lots of progress there. All right, let's take a look at the price. We are in Indonesia, and our good friends over at bitcoin.co.id have the largest Bitcoin exchange here in Indonesia. And according to them, one Bitcoin is worth 5.8 million rupiah. So that's how much you can get. That's how much you have to spend in Indonesian IDR to get one Bitcoin. Of course, most of us are used to talking in terms of dollars. The average right at this moment is $426.68. And that has like gone up and down this week. Here's the Bitcoin time machine over the last week. 1 week ago, we were down under $400. We had this kind of momentous rise and then drop. And just in the last, like, maybe couple hours, we've had another precipitous drop in the price. But round about this time, I think the Giorgio, you mentioned that the Bitcoin Roundtable was meeting to try to decide the fate of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is having an existential crisis at the moment, where they've got a technical problem that they cannot reach consensus on how to fix it. But there was a quite high-profile meeting, which represented about 80% of the computing power, and 5 core developers met. And so there was a lot of bullishness on the price as a result. We'll get into that in just a minute, but that's, I think, why we had this little spike in price in the middle of the week. All right, did you guys take a look at this? This is the transaction volume for Bitcoin, right? Of course, if you look at the all-time chart, you can see that Bitcoin, since about 2012 or so, has been on an unmistakable rocket launch in terms of transaction volume. This is what's causing Bitcoin to have its existential crisis, because the technology is almost at its limit. If I go back to the 6-month view here, sorry, you can see that a while back they did a stress test, and they reached about 241,000 transactions per day. That's pushing the limit around 3 or 4 transactions per second. And we've now reached, the last dot on the graph is above when we had all of those, basically, some call it a spam attack, some people called it a stress test, but it really is pushing the envelope on the number of transactions that Bitcoin can handle. And it won't be long before we're at a sustained level above where Bitcoin can operate. So again, Bitcoin is fraught with dangers, but well, we're not dead yet. So okay, what have I got here? All right. Okay, so here is the thing that happened over the weekend. All right. This woman, Laura Shin, has been doing a lot of good reporting on Bitcoin. She's especially good with this particular topic, where it seems to be a technology problem, right? I mean, Bitcoin is reaching its transaction limit. What kind of technical fix is viable? But what she's really been doing is painting the cultural picture and the political picture around why we can't fix this problem. It's actually a simple problem. The blocks in the blockchain are too small to handle all of the transactions that people want to do. So the simple fix is to increase the block size. But you've got a majority of the mining power happening in China, and a majority of the development happening in the Western world, so to speak. And there are conflicting economic incentives for various parties. And so we are at an impasse. But these guys got together. You need a consensus to make a change. And these guys were able to assemble really the de facto powers that be within Bitcoin, right? Enough of the miners to represent about 80% of the computing power. That's enough to make a change. And no less than 5 core developers with commit changes to the core implementation of the Bitcoin protocol, right? So on Friday and Saturday, a group of key players in the Bitcoin met in Hong Kong and came to an agreement. I've got the agreement here. I'll put that link in the show notes. But it's summarized pretty much better here. The fact that Bitcoin is not controlled by any one entity, but by a sprawling group of developers and other economic actors means that it is not always obvious how problems will be solved or who is responsible for resolving them. Obviously, this has been in the news, and we've talked about it week in, week out. And I know a lot of you are familiar with the problem, but it bears repeating that this is a political problem, and the strength of Bitcoin is that there's nobody at the helm, and the weakness of Bitcoin is that there's nobody at the helm, and there are big companies with big venture capital money, people that are used to making decisions and taking action, and they just don't have that option. We've considered the various alternatives: Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin Unlimited, BIP 101 back in the day we were talking about. All of these things have failed, and well, you could say it's one more thing that didn't work. I prefer to take the Thomas Edison approach. It's well, that didn't work. Let's see what else is going to work. But it's interesting to read this. There's a lot of cultural stuff built in here. Quote from one of from BTC China. There were a lot of arguments during the roundtable, said Samson Mao, Chief Operating Officer, a China-based Bitcoin exchange, and one of the organizers of the event, which had about 24 attendees. We are not like-minded individuals who all think the same thing. However, we do have an intent to work together, which is the differentiator. Basically, you've got a bunch of miners, and this woman, Laura Shin, has postulated that these miners, they're mostly Chinese, and they don't want to vote, and they want to defer to authority, right? So they don't want to be asked which of these things would you like to do. That's like she hypothesizes that that's a Western concept, and they also don't want to entertain anybody that's not the incumbent. So you've got all these people in the West that are saying, let's vote and let's figure out which one is best. And then you've got the people with the majority of the computing power saying, well, we want to defer to the incumbent authorities, which is the core developers, right? Very small number of people. Let's see. For us, it's important not to decide on our own, but to collaborate with other parties because this is the greatest open source project ever. Let's see. Here's a repudiation of the other attempts to run, in this case, for Classic. I'm sorry, Bitcoin Classic. And in a way, he's kind of like stomping his feet and just making claims, but I think in this case it's true. It's futile to run Classic. This is done. This is over. Anyone who thinks otherwise is probably going to not be convinced of reality. Anyway, there's some interesting things that they decided here. They're going with a new technology to solve this problem in the short term, and it's called segregated witness. Is anybody taking a look at segregated witness? Instead of increasing the size of the blocks, they want to take some of the information in each transaction out. Basically, segregate the signing of the transaction from the transaction itself, which will have a de facto result in greater throughput. So I think they can get up to, I don't know, 5 or 6 transactions per second with that. And then by 2017, they're going to increase the block size. So this is the this is the crux of what they've decided. They're going to implement segregated witness in the next 2 months. Now, don't forget, we are right at the max. Right? There's people that are probably going to have a bad experience over the next 2 months trying to do Bitcoin transactions. It'll be interesting to see how you guys do around town trying to buy a $5 coffee with Bitcoin. Yeah, so far so good, JP?
Listric, I bought my Listric today, and it was seconds.
Yeah?
Seconds.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Around town, there is no problem because nobody waits for confirmations, and this is a problem for confirmations.
No, actually, well, that's true. What you're saying is true, but actually, you can not see any confirmation because if the block is full, then that request goes into the mempool, and it might make it into a subsequent block. And so, even zero confirmations may not show up all over the entire network when the network is full.
But we know where the most of the transactions are done. I'd say because obviously we're in a certain time zone, but maybe there was during 8 hours of daylight is actually less. I don't know.
Yes, well, I'm sure there's a spike during business hours in Ubud. So that's one daily spike.
There's a spike during business hours in China. Which we
Oh, is it China? I thought it was Ubud. Oh, man.
Yeah. Just a little blip on their radar.
But once they get segregated witness, smarter people than me say that will take the pressure off. But they're really not talking about a larger block size until July 2017. That's 2017. That is not this year. That is 1 year from 5 months from now.
So what percentage increase does that other approach get us?
The segregated witness? I think, I don't know, do you remember 30, 40%?
It depends on the type of transactions that are signed. If you have a one input, one output transaction, it's ×2. If you have transactions with several addresses that are signing the same transaction, if you have an HD wallet, the improvements could increase exponentially. But since most transactions are one input, one output, probably just a ×2 improvements so far.
So double my carriers.
At least twice as much, yeah.
Could
but
get
it's
us
unlikely to be, and it's unlikely to be much more for most transactions with us. And sorry, the 2017 hard fork that they promised. If you read the language, they used very specific and generic language to possibly participate the hard fork without having to get their words in a year's time. So they said, well, the code will be ready, and if the community is in agreement, if there is consensus, it is a word that I have redefined in a very Orwellian way, in my opinion. There will be a hard fork scheduled for, at the very least, but not earlier than July 2017. So if you read the fine print, they have defined things in such a way as to say that they will make code available, that things could happen at the very earliest in July 2017. Now we might change our mind and push it forward anyway.
So this nail-biting habit that I've developed,
Yes.
it can't end until around July 2017?
Yes, and it could probably start again a few months later.
Oh, okay, okay, all right. All right, any questions or comments on that? This is what drove the price up because they thought, oh, they're gonna solve it. And then I think maybe reality set in and the price came down a little bit.
Scroll, but so the words go down.
I thought this was an interesting comment. You know, even though the Classic didn't take, you know, Classic actually developed a patch set. You know, it was kind of a coup d'etat, right? They developed their own software and said, hey, let's get everybody to run this software as opposed to Bitcoin Core, which was not adopted, but it kind of kicked everybody in the pants a little bit. So again, the Thomas Edison approach, you know, we figured out what didn't work. I mean, it's all part of it, right? Yeah, I'll just put this in the show notes. You guys can take a look at it yourself if you're interested. And there's also the actual official thing released by the roundtable. And here are the people that signed it. Yeah, it's quite a list. Like I said, about 80% of the computing power of the Bitcoin network was represented at that meeting. All right. Okay, so this is a story posted by Andrea. Andrea, sorry. This is a guy from MIT weighing in on this very topic, right? Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting. The points that he makes is, first of all, he's worried. This is a very smart person, but he's very pro-Bitcoin.
He's the guy who pays a salary to Gavin Anderson, by the way.
Oh, really?
He's the guy who brought him into MIT.
Ah, interesting. Gavin Andreessen used to be the lead developer on Bitcoin, but it is no longer. But he's paid by MIT now, and this is the guy that pays him. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
But not me personally, but
Right.
he in his capacity as a director of the MIT Media Lab brought him in.
Mm-hmm. Well, so
Did they do it in the way to pull him out of Bitcoin, or after he was already floating around and left Bitcoin, or were they part of kind of the undermining and undermining? Or what?
At some point, the Bitcoin foundations ran out of money. They were paying Gavin's salary at the time when they realized that they didn't have the cash anymore to spend $150,000 on Gavin Andreessen anymore. The MIT decided to simply put it under the wing and make sure he would still have funding to do his Bitcoin research. And he still does a lot of Bitcoin research, and he's not paid by the NSA or by anybody else, I suppose. And he...
So it's keeping it going. It's keeping
Yes.
Bitcoin going as a supportive thing. It's constant,
Yes.
not trying to pull away at.
Although I don't think he merges code to Bitcoin anymore. I don't think he has added anything to the he hasn't done any technical work that has gone into the code in the past year and a half.
Right.
Not much anyway.
But he has worked on Bitcoin Classic and BIP 101 and Bitcoin Unlimited. So he's still a player in the whole atmosphere. But so I guess this is his boss, and his boss is in a particularly good position to comment on the state of very smart developers working on Bitcoin. And one of the things he says is that there's a lot of fatigue. Like, not only are they trying to do all this, difficult development, but they're in this political milieu that techies don't normally do all that well within, right? It's usually, open source software has its own brand of politics, and that is played out in other big open source projects like Linux and various Linux distros. And obviously the internet is all based on open standards, and there's politics involved with all of that. But I think he draws a distinction between those efforts and this one, because there's so much commercial interest and there's so much vitriol in the comments. And he's kind of saying that maybe these guys are getting tired, and we certainly don't want to scare away our brightest minds from working on Bitcoin. Maybe we should be a little more civil with one another, I think, is one of the major points he's reaching. The other thing that he talks about is all of this commercial interest in blockchain represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what secures Bitcoin. He warns that all of these big banks could make something that looks very Bitcoin-like, but doesn't have the same security. And that and he makes this subtle point that is really not appreciated by many people, even people that I think have invested a lot of money, is Bitcoin is really far and away the most secure crypto ledger in the world, right? And it's very, very difficult to replace the security represented by Bitcoin. So, anything more to add on that, or?
Well, the part that I like about the article was the way in which he compared the early internet to the early Bitcoin along a pretty unusual line of comparison, which is that in the early day of the internet, very few people talking about the very early 90s, very few people understood how the internet worked at a technical level to develop the standards that were necessary to actually take it to the next level. And those professionals were very few, far apart, and were trying to be co-opted by a large number of organizations for ends good and bad. And comparably now we find ourselves in a position where the core developers of Bitcoin, which some people tend not to like to very much, or think that maybe have a severe case of hubris, they're nonetheless very few. And it's difficult to fork away from that project, because nobody has the engineering firepower to replace them fundamentally. So the fact that they are often eccentrics, introverted, they have a tendency to be very nice to people, but only behind the computer. It's probably destines us to have us stuck with those group of people for a very long time. And probably the reason why all the Chinese miners don't want to get behind Classic is that those are two guys smoking pot somewhere in near Seattle that they now decided to take on a $6 billion beast and move forward by themselves with something that is far beyond their competence. Those guys might not like it replaced by a fee, but those two guys might not like it replaced by a fee, but maybe they cannot code it either if they wanted to, or they cannot move ahead with all the other engineering challenges that Bitcoin will have in the near future. So the core of all the technical people that are convinced that they are capable of moving Bitcoin forward are behind the core project. So we cannot fire them. We cannot make a clear cut from them in terms of moving the project forward. And this is the first part of the article. And then I think that he very eloquently said that the bank's blockchains are rubbish, or that the banks fundamentally do not know what they're doing and getting into this business, and then what they might get is simply an incremental improvement over the technology that we have yet today. But as we were saying in the previous meeting, people don't wake up excited about making faster bank settlements or having getting their wires faster.
I do.
Yeah.
And all the exciting stuff is behind a distributed ledger. So the innovation of the edges, or the open standards, interoperability, programmable money, all this stuff is something you'll get with the bank's blockchains. And this is towards the end of the article. And that's fundamentally it.
Yeah.
And it's a great analogy. He analogizes what's possible here because of the commercial interest coming in too early. It's very similar to what happened, the difference between the mobile internet and the internet that we have, infrastructure-wise. And yeah, it's an excellent analogy, because there's almost no relationship between the internet you have on here and the internet there.
Yeah, he did make that point.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's really important, and it's because this one is so metered. The original was designed to kind of foil those efforts, and so when this one they said, okay, we're gonna make our own, and
and it's something
almost
different.
always happens. It's like there's a parallel commercial development that just kind of doesn't get it, but manages to move all of the attention over to it, so it can take
Microsoft versus Apple.
well,
Yep.
All right.
you can't copy the internet though, and I don't think you're going to be very lucky copying the Bitcoin core or something.
All right. Next topic. Isn't this an interesting article? V0.12.0. This is the latest version of Bitcoin Core. It was released about 5 days ago, and to very little fanfare, I might add. And right now it's taking up about 240 nodes on the network, about 3.8% of the network. The interesting thing about that, though, is one of the features of version 12 is this opt-in replaced by fee, which, if you remember when we talked about it, it's kind of like going up to a vending machine and dropping in your quarter, getting the candy bar, and then pulling your quarter back out.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
This is the ability for someone before the first confirmation. Confirmations happen about every 10 minutes. Before the first confirmation, you can submit another transaction that usurps the previous transaction if it has a larger fee. Right. So if I go and buy a dinner at Kismet and I do my transaction and it's got a fee of 0.001 Bitcoin, and I have a full stomach, I walk out, I can submit another transaction where I change the outputs, so I send the money back to myself and attach a fee of 0.01 Bitcoin, and just like that, I've basically stolen a meal. So anyway, this is a very controversial feature, and right now it's only at 3.8% of the network, and it is opt-in. So I don't think this has been implemented in a lot of ways yet, But it's definitely something to be aware of, especially if you're in the Bitcoin business. If you're accepting Bitcoin payments, you need to check to see if this transaction has been formed this way. There's a programmatic way to check, but it requires implementation in all of our wallets and all of our software. We're not there yet. And until such time as that's implemented, we've got that danger.
What is the advantage of this feature?
Well, especially as the network gets full, if you don't have a large enough fee, your transaction may get ignored. And so the thinking is that, well, I submitted a transaction, but the fee was too low, so I'm going to submit another one with a higher fee so that it gets picked up by the network. So there's an incentive for some miner to process the transaction.
Which is only a problem because you have full blocks at the moment. So if you have full blocks, you do not need to replace by fee.
Yep.
Does
So-
that uptake, you said how many percent? Was it 20%?
3.8%.
3%. Is that normal for 5 days after a release?
I was wondering the same thing. I do not know the answer to that question. I'm not sure how long after a new release of Core is adopted. Anybody? That's a very good question. I had the same question.
The community is wanting to take it up, or they're kind of holding back. Or,
Yeah.
if they're
Well,
voting, but
this is a very controversial feature. I can see why. Well, actually, miners have an incentive to adopt this because they could possibly get higher fees. But miners are smart enough to know that if you ruin the money function of Bitcoin, the value will go down. And there is a flip side. I don't think that nuance is lost on miners. So
we like cutting the eye and the steel on the way, wouldn't it?
yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But that cat's out of the bag. All right, let's move on to the main event here, guys. We got the war on encryption. How many people saw JP's post with Tim Cook's letter? Yeah, this stuff is in the news, right? Anybody know what this thing is? The Enigma. Actually, this is kind of in the public's consciousness lately. They had a movie last summer. I can't remember what was it called? Turing.
Oh yeah, I watched it.
Yeah.
I had another title.
It was pretty good, but it's interesting to me that as it's not that long ago that we had imperfect encryption, right? This was state of the art back in 1942 or something, and of course the Allies broke the code, and it's a fascinating story. I liked the movie. Did you guys like that movie? That kind of
I love that movie.
yeah, it was very good.
I was just going to look for the title.
Yeah.
I'll look at the title and I'll tell you. One thing I heard about, they have this, he's a gay guy, and that comes through.
Ah, yeah.
And what gay boy friends of mine pointed out, that they made him kind of reclusive and not get on with other people.
Uh-huh.
Not reclusive, but kind of like a
Kind of a weird guy.
yeah, a little bit. Even though he was gay, so it wasn't ostracized.
The Imitation Game. That's
the
what it's called.
Imitation Game.
Yes.
Well done. But they made his character be kind of like he wasn't really an all around success. He had these real social, he was kind of ousted from a social group of people that I who've read his biographies and a lot of the material on it. Said that was just a Hollywood fiction. They did it to make the story more interesting. That's another one of pointing the gay boy is not, substandard and this or that. He saved millions and millions of lives. Some of us are around because of his work.
Yeah.
But they I think, are more interesting.
It didn't end well for him. That was
No.
true, right? That the fact that they sterilized him later in life and
Yeah, they forced him to take female hormones, which is devastating. Kind of they did. It wasn't like when people elect to go through a gender change and they had to do a gender realignment and choose hormones and a certain. Basically, it was like castrating chemically, and it fucks with people's whole well-being. Guys just would be in crisis and tears.
yeah, that would bum me out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And-
Oh, he
and I
committed
don't
suicide. I
think
forgot
just about
that.
Anybody could make it through that.
Tim Cook
it's like killing him.
So
Oh,
connection is.
interesting. I didn't know Tim Cook was gay.
Say that again?
Isn't Tim Cook gay? I
Yeah.
thought.
Which one's Tim Cook? Or-
Yeah,
He's the guy who wrote he's the guy that's fighting the FBI right now.
I think Alan Turing got pardoned or
they issued official apologies.
After, this is after his death.
Last year.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well,
But they knew all along that he had done this stuff, but they just used the gateway card.
Well, it was a fascinating story, and it was also fascinating how, you know, even after they solved the problem, they would have to let ships sink, because that would, if they let too many, if they basically it would reveal that they had the secrets that decrypted the cryptography, and so they had to let people die in order to not reveal the secret.
Otherwise, Hitler and all those would change their plan and not carry on doing what they're doing. So they were just trying to stay one step ahead of the game, but not let it on.
Right.
Very
But that's also
clever upon clever.
Yeah, but that's also an interesting dichotomy between then and now, because now you've got Tim Cook, who's being asked to solve one case, but he's saying, no, I can't solve that one case because I've got the whole world to take care of.
Oh, I better
Right.
find out what's going on.
Right? Long story short, the FBI has asked Tim Cook to provide a backdoor to the encryption on the iPhone, and basically he's got a court order saying they've got to solve this problem for this one phone that the FBI cannot get into. It's the phone of the San Bernardino shooter. Right?
I think it's doing it because it's big in China right now.
What's that?
Apple is very big in China.
Oh, okay.
And the Chinese are very, very fond of their security of their phones because of their government.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so it's also economic.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it is economic for Apple, but they are making a principled stance. Although I understand they've unlocked 70 other iPhones for, based on other subpoenas.
Super. It's like
Yeah, but they're
control level 9,000. He's saying this, and he's unlocked phones for the FBI before.
Right.
And then to get into the Chinese market, the condition was you're going to provide us with a master key for our users, for our citizens who are not allowed to have some kind of software or device that we can't watch at all times and get out of the Great Firewall. So he's just. I mean, the reason they really don't want to do it is economic, in that if they give the master key away, right, to an FBI agent or to the government, the way the government or any government in the world works, it won't be long until everybody has this. And that's one thing that's differentiated Windows from Apple, is that Apple's so proprietary and the code is locked up that they haven't been hit with as many bugs and all these things as like different Windows versions. And source code hasn't leaked and all this stuff. And letting this out to one agent is not a big deal if they only use it for this purpose. But it's the government, and the Chinese government itself has been hacking the U.S. government. I mean, they've got every single federal personnel file now through a hack.
Yeah.
Even if he only gives it to one guy, and then that guy doesn't reveal it, but the Chinese hacked that computer
Right.
in the Pentagon, boom.
So this cartoon, I think, sums it up quite nicely. Again, thanks, JP. Where you've got Tim Cook getting ready to invent the backdoor in the iPhone. You've got the FBI right behind Tim Cook, but then you've got hackers, repressive regimes, et cetera, that are just waiting for this this ability to be born, for Pandora's box to be opened, right? And of course, let's see, this is in reference to what you were just saying. Hacker says he's breached DHS and FBI leaks claim staff data. Basically, the FBI and the U.S. government have already been hacked. It's well-worn territory that the U.S. government data can be hacked and has been hacked. I think they lost all of the federal employees' data from the database that keeps track of all federal employees was hacked, and Office of Personnel Management.
What is the difference between this one particular case and the other 71 that have been previously opened? Is it the case that the FBI mistakenly reset the password and they have to do an additional level of cracking rather than just open it up?
Well, there is some nuance like that. I mean, this is different. I think.
So this is individual compared to the other ones.
Well, this is general compared to the other ones. I think the other ones they could, like, I don't know. Right, they got a warrant and they had the ability to do just that one phone without creating new software that was a backdoor for all iPhones everywhere.
Master key to all the population of China, for example. That's different than going to Apple and saying, I want to
Right.
hack through this phone. Is that what you're saying?
No, the FBI is saying we just want to crack this one phone, but based on the technicalities, they need to create a whole new, I think they need to have the phone update itself so that it won't erase itself if there's too many failed attempts, right? So,
Security is foiled for that one. It can be foiled for all of them.
right. Now,
How about if you just took guns off Americans and then they couldn't shoot each other? No, the whole.
300. How are you going to get 350 million weapons in 80 million unique locations? Isn't that up?
Yeah.
And you can print them. The dude in Texas is 3D printing them, so they'll be able to be made in England next.
well, and I mean,
Not saying they should be, but that.
not to turn this into a gun debate, but I mean, there's
That's what the debate actually is, isn't it?
Bitcoin encryption.
But I know this is a terrorist event, but it's a mass shooting, isn't it?
yeah, mhm.
Why is it called terrorist? Is there something specific about this case?
Yeah, man, they're Muslims, so it's
They say that the Apple software texts say that the FBI has already been into this phone. That this
so that's the,
accidentally changed the password, or really did they
so
find what they wanted and then made it alteration?
that's the next thing. Of course, this was also posted in the group. Did the FBI deliberately force Apple into a corner? Yeah, you think that's what's going on?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
They have everything they need. It doesn't fit the narrative, like you just mentioned, Gary. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
fit the agenda. These two perpetrators, but if they can they will not let this opportunity go to waste. So they put themselves in a corner and then said, we really want to figure out what's. I mean, these guys shot people, and give us a master key, and then.
Right. So that's actually the hypothesis of this article right here, saying that, you know, the FBI isn't really all that concerned with this particular case, but wants the ability to spy on all phones, to have that master key to open up the investigative power on everybody. I'm not saying I believe that or not, but you.
Search without a warrant.
Yeah.
So can they do that already on Wi-Fi, for internet use? People are using the computers, and can they do this on other phones, and can they do this through our normal phone calls? I'm just trying to understand what's another level of, invasion that's going on with this.
Well, I mean, that's a complicated question. You've still got the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which says that no persons or effects will be searched but upon probable cause, and the warrant needs to state the persons to be searched and the things to be possessed or something like that. I'm probably murdering that.
I thought that they took all that off. And they just
Well,
they hijacked the whole
well,
thing, and they said
this
it's
is-
terrorists and they can bypass everything. So
This is why Edward Snowden's revelations were such a bombshell, because they seemed to countermand the Fourth Amendment of the United States. And this was actually the justification that Edward Snowden used. He said, I swore an oath to the Constitution. Yeah, I've got my rules for working as a contractor for the NSA, but I also swore an oath to the Constitution. We've got the Fourth Amendment. All this stuff is going on and people don't know about it. Whistleblowers before me have been ridiculed, fired, harassed. So he did what he did. So it's an ongoing kind of question mark. What's actually happening?
If you read what he revealed, they can turn the phones on when they're off. They can do anything. I mean, you'd have to start, to answer your question, you have to start with what you think is still private, and then ask, is it, you know what I mean?
is there anything?
Is there
Are they
anything?
doing anything?
That's the real question.
And if they open up this back door, what new level does that mean to take it to? That's kind of where I'm trying to get a sense of. Because I thought they were huge.
Yeah. I mean, it's really fascinating, and there's all kinds of iterations you can. If you put your tinfoil hat on, I'm not saying you're like.
I got one on.
But I mean, you can. The imagination runs wild with what's possible, and it's easier to entertain conspiracy theories these days because of what Edward Snowden revealed. Because before him, who were the other guy? Binney. There were some other whistleblowers that came before him that were just totally castigated. Like I think they're working at Walmart now or something. I mean, their lives were ruined.
And in New Zealand, guy was just building this runoff for the rich, so people don't think it's accidental.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It's yeah.
Yeah, well, this is,
Who's that mega guy? Was that New Zealand mega?
Kim.com.
oh,
They got him on a .com, even though he was originally a German, right?
.com, I think.
Kim.com.
Right, Kim.com.
Then he gets
What is .com? Where does that come from? Is that Dutch?
Mega, right?
No, it's
Oh, is he German? Okay.
They got him on a technicality. That was pretty.
Yeah, he had that thing posted to the top of his Twitter. I've never done business in the United States. I've never visited the United States. I've never,
He's not a citizen.
Yeah.
He's got, he was a German, and then I think got citizenship in either New Zealand or Australia.
Right.
I don't know.
But he's being extradited and will go to prison in the States.
Because I think his domain was parked at a .com, which is registered.
Surely his servers weren't in the States, though. But if it's
the ICANN, they got him through like the ICANN, where like the registries in Virginia or something. I don't know details.
Jurisdiction
is
a big deal.
Yeah.
It's it's kind of like Pirate Bay stuff, right?
Well, it's basically a file sharing network, and people were uploading copyrighted material, movies and things like that. And he was like, I just have a platform, and that didn't wash with Hollywood.
He paid money off the people that uploaded stuff if the stuff got downloaded, and people had to pay to download the stuff. So he was an intermediary between people that made a profit off of the piracy.
So, Facebook is a platform. I was wondering about this. Facebook's a platform where people are uploading all sorts of stuff that violates copyright and all that kind of stuff, but there's maybe not profit involved.
Fair use.
Hey?
There's fair use.
Use exclusion to the.
Right, but YouTube will take stuff down. They've actually got algorithms that will identify copyrighted material, and it will come down in short order.
Bob Marley playlist.
Oh man,
10 million views,
Bob?
and then boom, and then if you use a VPN, they got all kinds. You disconnect from this country, connect here. You can view this. They are totally working with the music copyright industry.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
That's what Bowman did.
I know, man. I was in chill mode. I was at the beach, and it was like.
No more Bob Marley.
Yeah, that message. You know they do that.
Oh.
Did you have any ads on that video?
I don't even remember.
There's scored some money there.
Yeah, no, it wasn't
You'll
mine,
play
but
it.
it was
Okay.
a great compilation. It's gone.
He just misses it.
But it is interesting to support that hypothesis that the FBI wants to, has been in the phone, or the phone's not that important to them, but they want the broader powers that they think that they can force Apple to provide. We looked at Tim Cook's letter. This is the one that you posted, JP. But this is the letter from James Comey, the head of the FBI. We could not look the survivors in the eye if we did not follow this lead. And there's a lot of kind of emotional language, I guess I would say, around, do you really want, their blood on your hands, and, do we want to look these guys in the eye? And I don't know. It's not as well written as Tim Cook's.
People who could be at were killed themselves.
Yeah.
So, what do they want to find out?
I think they want to find out what computers the phones were paired with, and who they were calling on the phone and talking to, because there's.
The other thing is their personal phones they destroyed before they went on the rampage, and this phone is actually their employer's phone.
Ah, yeah.
So it's probably got nothing to do, but it's not that crucial. You wouldn't have thought it's the other one that got destroyed that could be more crucial by unlocking any specific.
You can get deep psychological insights from which emojis they chose to use in their texting conversations.
Like it's gonna solve it.
So I don't know. It's a question mark. But this whole thing is going to play out in the public eye. And what happens if the Supreme Court says, Apple, you've got to build a backdoor to encryption?
That's an interesting question.
Well, this is not just cracking up. This is actually an attack on encryption. I'm finally getting the message.
It is and it isn't. It's an attack on Apple's implementation of encryption. To be precise. Yeah, I mean they're asking Apple to write software that circumvents or decrypts the encryption that's on the phone.
Right. So this is not. in a way, Bitcoin, it's got its own encryption systems. It's not
Right.
the same as.
It's not possible mathematically to break current encryption, as far as we know. So the encryption that protects Bitcoin and the encryption that protects your HTTPS inside your browser and your connection to your online banking, as far as we know, the government doesn't have any way to crack that. And that was right. And that was a very interesting point that I wanted to make about design choices, right? Because these guys at Airbits wrote a little piece and said, you know, it's all fine and good to stand up to the government and say, you know, we don't want to break our own security, but it's possible to architect your software in such a way that you cannot crack your own software. And that's the approach that Airbits has taken. That's called trustless architecture or zero knowledge architecture, where they do client-side encryption, and even if the government shows up with a subpoena, they are not able to decrypt their customers' data. And they do this not because they want to thumb their nose at the government, but because if their servers get hacked, they have to find a password, a decryption for every single individual user, right? It's not like when hackers get into Target and they've got 1 million credit card numbers, right? Or when the Chinese hack into the Office of Personnel Management and have every record of every employee that ever worked for the U.S. government. In the case of Airbits, because of the way they've architected their software, they would have to decrypt each individual's records with, you know, strong encryption that takes the, you know, using a known supercomputer millions of years of brute force guessing to do it.
What I'm hearing in that is that the government can make, you know, they can make whatever friggin' rules they want, right? Seems like. I mean, there are meant to be parameters they work with.
They can't.
But if they wanted, just out of interest, if they made it illegal, they said you cannot have software that is unravelable.
Right.
Then people would have to figure out how to go back and create another thing that would give them access. They say whatever your thing is, Apple, you are responsible with your product. You're responsible to give us the data if we ask for it. Otherwise, we'll feed you.
Right. So
shoot all your families like we do in other countries. Then people are going to end up.
Well, the question is, will this architecture become illegal?
Exactly.
Right. You've got this was last summer. Let me see if I can find it. Last summer, David Cameron was saying he wanted to ban strong encryption. Right. It's not unprecedented. Back in 1976, the Arms Export Control Act had cryptography listed as a munition.
Yes.
And
PGP got in trouble.
right, I think they finally. Here's the U.S. government had long regarded cryptographic software as a munition and thus subject to arms trafficking export controls. Can you imagine getting if you're your little Airbits team and you get a call from the arms trafficking control?
Yeah, no, this happened in the 90s over PGP, over sending a PGP encrypted email outside of the country.
But it makes one wonder, like, will it someday be illegal to have a thumb drive with encrypted data on it? You know, when you're in the airport.
Status quo, you know, if you just looked at it objectively, and if you were in the status quo of any state in your country, doesn't matter, and you could wave a wand, you wouldn't want any individual to have privacy. You'd want to be at the power seat and have absolute say about everybody, and that's the way it's been going for quite a long time, right? Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't they just all get together, different various countries, and just attack them and just make it illegal? So then, I seem like to be a matter of time, frankly. But
are there any ramifications to Bitcoin if the FBI is successful in this case?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there are hundreds of millions of iPhones around the world. I think that
would make every transaction vulnerable.
Right. There would be a big question mark around the whole world on whether people's data on their iPhones was available to hackers.
Presumably, it applies straight away because of the precedent to Google and to every other platform.
Yeah, I mean, well.
Yeah, are there other platforms that don't have the same security that Apple does?
Well,
right?
Yeah, I mean, there's Android. Android is open source software. So actually,
that doesn't bring down Bitcoin.
No, neither does Apple. If the FBI if the FBI is successful and Tim Cook's got to build this, it doesn't break Bitcoin. Right. But it does affect.
The question of will they make the technology itself illegal?
Right, right.
That could affect
Let's say that they have the precedent with Apple. Do they then, in a subsequent case, say, you know what, encryption is we need to be able to get into any encrypted message whatsoever. So we're going to ban. I mean, that's why this thing is called the war on encryption, right? Are they going to ban encryption?
Isn't it interesting to note that they're very concerned about this, and then the reasoning they use behind it is, for example, for these incidences of terrorism, none of the people have ever used any encryption. Most, 99% of the attacks, Paris, they just send unencrypted text messages and phone calls and say, let's do it. Yep, I
Got time to go.
Yep, okay. And they already, that's the most unsecured, I mean, technically, if we're to believe they have what they have, that's picked up by the algorithms right away. They go, Gary just made this phone call and he's in East France and he's talking about weapons and guns and he's gonna something call the cops, right? So they say that these people are encrypting.
Right.
They're not.
So they're taking you know let
Bitcoin.
And they're using see, but that's
Yeah.
important because that's when it does affect Bitcoin.
well, you never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Order out of chaos.
The good news is, I think more and more people are on to that formula. You know, it's funny that like the old playbook is like not working as well as it used to. In fact, all of this encryption that's with Facebook and Google, I mean, there's way more encryption now as a result of the Snowden revelations and maybe even this want of control. This pressure by the government to unlock these things is just having the opposite effect, like that which you resist persists kind of dynamic.
Streisand effect. Barbara Streisand effect.
What's that?
She didn't want people taking photos of her beachfront property, and then as soon as she said something, all the photos came out. So
Funny how that happens.
It does seem kind of like a race, doesn't it? A race for the government to have track of everything. And those who want to resist that and finding some alternatives that will stay outside of that. And,
Yes.
I mean, if everything's, hack-inable, traceable, then every person will be monitored in every position that we're in. If you resist it, what other kind of options do you get to have that network of anonymity?
Yes. Are we going to? Do we have the right to remain anonymous? Do we have the right to private communications? Or does our security necessitate deferring to the law enforcement every aspect of our lives that we have on our phone?
How are they doing? What's the report card? Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we've got to leave it there, folks. A great conversation as always, but we are out of time. I'll just remind you that we've got the YouTube channel. This episode will go up on the YouTube channel immediately after I disconnect here, so you can catch old episodes there. Please subscribe if you're so inclined, and please join us again next week. We'll do it at the same time, same place, and same place online. Thanks for coming tonight, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.